All right. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are joining us from. Thank you so much for being here today for this very special side event alongside the UN Commission on the Status of Women on exploring the reproductive identities of adolescent girls in Kenya. Before we get started, I just want to give a major shout out to all of the panelists that you see on the screen, and I'm going to be saying a little bit more about them in a few minutes. But as all of them can attest, we've been working so hard on this event. Some of us since December, but all of us started coming together just in the last 2 weeks. It has been a long 2 weeks, but I am so proud of my team and everything that we're about to share with you today. So with that, my name is Pavita Singh. I'm the Executive Director of Girls Health Ed. I am very excited to share this PowerPoint presentation with you today and to introduce our esteemed panelists. Before I do that, though, I would love to get us aligned on logistics. So this webinar is being recorded. So anybody who is not here, who has to leave early, who joins in late, you will have access to everything. And we're excited to share that with you. For anybody who intends to live tweet alongside the presentation, you may use the following handles: Girls Health Ed, Girls Health Ed KE, and UN_CSW. And then you may use the hashtags CSW68, CSE number 4, gender equality, and reproductive identity. So with that, I'll stop sharing for a second. And I'll set the stage by telling you all a little bit about Girls Health Ed and the Cora Lab. So Girls Health Ed is an international NGO. We were founded about 11 and a half, 12 years ago. I am proud to be celebrating my 10-year anniversary with Girls Health Ed this month, International Women's Month. So it's very synchronous. We're an international NGO whose mission is to foster healthy, informed, and empowered decision-making in adolescent girls and young women through comprehensive health and sexuality education. Our theory of change that went into the founding of this organization is based on the idea of the gender confidence gap. So during adolescence, as I'm sure we all remember, this is a time when everybody exhibits a drop in confidence. But what research has found is that by the time they reach young adulthood, young men are more likely to get that confidence back, whereas young women are not. And this leads to a gender confidence gap throughout the lifespan that puts girls and young women behind their male counterparts in terms of educational opportunities, professional opportunities, economic opportunities, and overall opportunities for self-esteem and self-confidence. So Girls Health Ed's work is based on the idea that if we're able to intervene at a critical junction of development, namely adolescence, with the tools and the education for girls and young women to love themselves and take care of themselves and really make the best decisions that are aligned with them and their own well-being, then not only are we changing physical and mental health outcomes in the short term, we're also allowing in the long term for girls to allow themselves to step outside that gender confidence gap, to narrow that gender confidence gap, to enhance their self-esteem, to make decisions that are best aligned with their educational goals, with their professional goals. And as it turns out, a country's economic well-being is directly tied to the health and the education of its girls and women. So we are not just having an impact on individuals, on individual girls and young women themselves, but we're giving them the skills to share what they're learning in our workshops and in our programs with their families, with their communities, with their classmates, thereby contributing to the prospering of entire societies and entire economies and entire communities. And so what is going to be the theme throughout today's webinar is that when we provide girls and young women with the tools to love and take care of themselves, we are putting them in a position to make the best choices for themselves. In addition to being the executive director of Girls Health Ed, I'm proud to share that I'm also a doctoral student at Teachers College, Columbia University. And this event today is a partnership between Girls Health Ed and the Cora Lab at Teachers College, Columbia University, which is the maternal and reproductive psychology lab. And so the concept of reproductive identity that you're going to be learning about today, our lab members are at the forefront of that research. And this is a very exciting time in maternal and reproductive psychology and sexual and reproductive health and rights in general. And so I am proud to introduce to you our esteemed panelists for today, who, again, I cannot sing their praises enough. We really came together, and I'm super excited for everything that we're about to share with you. So our keynote speaker today is going to be Ms. Sankara Gitau, who's based out of Nairobi, and she's a steering committee member for Women in Dev. Next, we have Ms. Josefina Streeter, who is a recent graduate in the psychology program, the Spirituality, Mind, and Body Psychology program at Teachers College, Columbia University, and completed her certificate in Women, Gender, and Sexuality. After that, we have Ms. Reagan Moss, who is a graduate student at, actually, she's a teaching fellow with Girls Health Ed here in the US, and she's a graduate student pursuing her master's in public health at Mailman School of Public Health at Columbia University, and very proud to share that in a few months, she's going to be starting her PhD at Tulane University, doing everything that she's excited and passionate about in the reproductive and maternal health space. After that, we have Ms. Bridget Mutoni, who is our incredible Kenya program manager for Girls Health Ed, and she has really scaled up our programs in Kenya and has turned our Kenya programs around. So major shout out to her. And then last but not least, we have Ms. Berta Kihenjo, who is an incredible teaching fellow with Girls Health Ed Kenya. And so with that, I'm excited to turn it over to Sankara for her keynote address. Sankara, your 7 minutes starts now.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon to all of us. Thank you so much for your time and your dedication to the issues of girls. Allow me to start off with a quote. This quote is said by a clinical psychologist, Aurelie, who was also the lady behind the concept of reproductive identity. So it says, this burgeoning era of gender, reproductive self-expression necessitates a new metaphor reflecting the freedom to write one's own story. And how beautiful and how empowering. You know, the question of whether to become a parent or not occurs to everybody. At different levels, yes, the process has been defined as a new term that has been coined called matrescence, which is a term I've not heard of. So, but then that said, I think bodily autonomy encompasses the right to choose, you know, the freedom to choose. And the freedom to choose is a human right in itself. So to choose whether to become a parent or not is a fundamental aspect of dignity. It's a fundamental aspect of humanity and also autonomy. So being able to make a decision over anything in itself is freedom. But imagine being young and being exposed to, you know, information and knowledge that allows for you to choose at a young age. So obviously there's a question of, you know, do you even know what you're choosing? You know, at what age does a girl know that she's choosing? And when I was doing a little bit of research, I found that the earliest pregnancy, or rather even childbirth recorded in history, was of a girl called Lina Marcella, and she had a baby at the age of 5. Then I also searched for the oldest childbirth or the oldest pregnancy, and I found a lady who was 78 years old and she had twins. So you can only imagine, this is a topic or this is a concept that really from the age of 5 to the age of 74, and you know, there's perhaps so many other unrecorded cases. This is a topic that women and girls are faced with every single day of their lives. So to imagine that you know, that the concept of reproductive identity covers such a huge spectrum of our lives, it means that this is not only critical, it's not only essential, it's something that we have not been discussing. And I started to think about gender identity, and I wondered, why have we never had the issue of reproductive identity? So in as much as it's a new concept, in as much as the world doesn't even know much about it, I really appreciate the table that, you know, Girls Health Ed is creating and the seats that Girls Health Ed is bringing to the table to really discuss this issue and to discuss the issue with girls who are not only critical, but girls who are affected by this decision every day. So then there's also the flip side, that is, you know, what is the role, you know, of comprehensive sex education or even comprehensive health education? And I was thinking, comprehensive sex health education can be taught by many people within society. A lot of us have the responsibility to teach this. You know, I'm a mother to 2 children, and I had them when I was, I'd say, relatively young. But then nobody ever gave me the concept. Nobody even asked, like, I didn't even think that it was something that I needed to even choose. Like, for me, it was not, you know what I mean? So to see that now we have comprehensive health ed education in schools that allows for girls to not only have the information to raise to their agency, but then also the right to choose, and to even know that I could actually aspire to be a lot of things and not just a lawyer or a doctor or a teacher or a pilot. You know what I mean? So it's very interesting to even see some of the findings that this study has come up with, to see that girls know what they want, and we've been saying this to the world for a very long time. People just don't listen. But then the other flip side is that girls also want to plan. And when you plan, even as an adult, it just means that you're raising to your agency at a level that is personal. So even this topic in itself, reproductive identity, I believe it's more personal to me than it is even, professional. As someone who has been working in this space for a long time, it's very deeply personal. So the role of CSOs, the way I see it within this concept is, one is that CSOs will have to embark on scientifically accurate, comprehensive health ed. It has to be backed up by science. It has to be backed up by fact. So the way we go about learning and relearning, research, evaluating, monitoring, evaluating, all of it has to be scientifically accurate. One of the reasons that I found, that had Lena have a baby at the age of 5 was the fact that she had actually gone through something they call precocious puberty, which basically means that you have your periods before the age of 8. So you can only imagine how many other girls across the world are having their periods before that age and they don't even know. There's the underlying factor that she must have been abused by somebody for her to have had a baby at that age. And if you even go back in time, you'll find that if just do a quick Google search, nobody talks about the abuse, nobody's talking about the rape, nobody talks about how this could have possibly happened. So this is to show that there are so many challenges that girls have, let alone women. Secondly, I think that we need to also offer gender disaggregated data. Obviously, as I was looking for the youngest childbirth, I also looked for the youngest father. And I found that the youngest father was 9, And it's interesting because whenever we do comprehensive, sex ed or even comprehensive health education, we don't think about boys as much as we think about girls. And this is because traditionally, the burden of having children or the burden of childcare or even the thought of having children, or even family planning has always been on the girl or the woman. So this means that we have to also make sure that all the data we are collecting and also the material, the knowledge, packages that we're putting out are very gender disaggregated to make sure that we are catering for every gender, not to even mention the challenges that LGBTQI have around reproductive identity. So then lastly, partnering with beneficiaries within the context of the work that we are doing with girls is going to be very critical. It's very inspiring to see that the work that Girls Health Ed is doing is very inclusive. Including the girl is important. It is imperative. This is the only way we will know why girls worry, what girls worry about, what they're thinking, what they're not thinking, what they're curious about. And it's also been found that, when you offer comprehensive health ed at the right place, at the right time, and in the right way, it actually reduces or decreases the chances of abuse. So if you're still wondering, you're on this webinar and you're wondering, so why reproductive identity? Why is it so special? I'll give you a couple of things. So one, to sustain gender identity, we really have to look into reproductive identity. Second, girls from the ages of 15 to 19 have been found. These are girls who have teens, let's say teen girls who've been pregnant between ages 15 and 19 will at a double rate experience postpartum depression, which leads to maternal suicide, it leads to infanticide, and it also leads to, definitely, poor child development, which then further along leads to more complications for the child, which is equals to more complications for the mother. Then lastly, nearly 5,000 women and girls die due to pregnancy at childbirth because of pregnancy complications. Basically, every 2 minutes, we have a woman or a girl dying because of this. Why is this not important? So I really, really appreciate this study, and I appreciate the findings, and I appreciate the thinking and the paradigm of thought around reproductive identity, because I think that even for myself in my big age as an adult, this is still a topic that I want to really understand, to know that it's way beyond family planning and it's way beyond the issue of, SRHR or even contraception. So thank you so much. And I think, this is a place that we want to keep plugging in. Let's keep this conversation going and let's automatically amplify this concept. I think it's critical. there's no reason as to why it's missing across the world. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sankara. What an incredible and powerful way to set the stage. So now I'm really excited for the main content of the webinar. So to give a little bit of context about what we at Girls Health Ed did. So I am a member of both the the maternal and reproductive psychology lab at Teachers College, Columbia University, and simultaneously Girls Health Ed. And so at Girls Health Ed, we're all about partnerships. We're all about joining forces and tag teaming. So the Cora lab at TC Columbia has been doing some really incredible work around reproductive identity and starting to get reproductive identity in front of sexuality educators. Here at Girls Health Ed, we are among the first to take that work beyond sexuality educators and present them to the girls and young women themselves. So we adapted lesson plans and curricula from the Cora lab and adapted them to Girls Health Ed's curriculum and to the cultural context in Kenya. And so with that, we're going to share what that process looked like, and we're excited to share some of the pilot findings with you. And so now I'm excited to turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Ms. Josefina Streeter. As I mentioned, she is a recent graduate of Teachers College, Columbia University, and she's had the pleasure of living and working in Kenya, doing sexual and reproductive health work on the ground there. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. And Josefina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pavita. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the background of sexual and reproductive health in Kenya. Globally, high rates of unintended pregnancy are linked to gaps in family planning services. Therefore, concerns about the performance of family planning programs have arisen in the last 2 decades, with the understanding that real choice is not feasible without an adequately developed delivery system, as Sankara was saying before. Despite the widespread use of contraception, recent data from the World Health Organization found that adolescents aged 15 to 19 years in low and middle-income countries had an estimated 21 million pregnancies each year. Approximately 50% of those are unintended. Factors such as age at first marriage, educational level, wealth, exposure to media, place of residence, and region of the world are significantly associated with women's sexual and reproductive decision-making. So the ability to choose if, when, and how have or not a children is strongly interconnected with social, economic, and geographical indicators. While fertility rates worldwide have been decreased, in sub-Saharan Africa, fertility rates almost double world rates, known as the African effect. This is so that the region is projected to have 87% of the global population growth in the next 80 years. Next slide, please. Kenya is committed to achieve gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls, and had made a compromise to improve sexual and reproductive health in the country. An example of this is the ratification of the 2030 Agenda and the creation of a national strategy as a roadmap to achieve this goal. Despite these efforts, an estimated of 37% of ever partnered women and girls aged 15 years and older were subjected to physical, sexual, or psychological violence by a current or former intimate partner in the last year. Even though the right to health is guaranteed in the Constitution of Kenya, according to the Minister of Health, Kenya's rate of physicians, nurses, and midwives is only 13.8 per 10,000 population, indicating a significant gap considering the recommendation of 44.5 ratio. Approximately 5,000 women and girls died annually due to pregnancy and childbirth complications, in which over 80% of maternal deaths are attributed to poor quality of care. Despite the enormous advances of the country in this matter, there is still a need for new ways of measuring and implementing these policies and programs, making it compulsory to think about a new and creative solution to improve comprehensive sexual education in the country. Next one, please. Thank you. To understand a little bit more about the context and why high fertility rates and large families are considered morally correct in the country, it is important to notice that there is an essential heritage of religion in which ancestors are honored and their spirits appease through the bearing of children as descendants, making high fertility and large families to be morally correct in Kenya. This can also be noticed as how religious institutions continue to celebrate an era of chastity and sexual conservatism. Comprehensive sexuality education is currently taught in schools, included in the life skills education curriculum, but it is also divided in other subjects such as biology and Christian religious education. This facilitates that teachers are more easily to skip topics that they view as controversial. Therefore, some challenges that are necessary to address are the cultural conservatism, the emphasis on HIV education and abstinence, the negative focus on sex, the inadequate teacher training. For example, a recent student in the Kisumu area found that less than 1/4 of teachers had been trained in this topic. All of this to say that schools, families, and churches are uncomfortable talking about sex, creating a not favorable space for young adults to explore their sexuality, less to discuss reproduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Josefina. So I'm going to spend a few moments going more in depth on the concept of reproductive identity. So in her keynote, Sankara raised several great points that all ultimately emphasize the interconnectedness of reproductive autonomy and human expression. These are connected because reproductive autonomy allows us to materialize reproductive outcomes that we want, such as how, when, and why we decide to become or not become a parent. The connection between self-expression and human identity with our choice in parenthood and non-parenthood is something that we've all probably witnessed and experienced in some shape or form. And there's a lot of power in being able to label this connection that we've all witnessed, as it helps us to self-realize and actualize this important component of our identities and ourselves. And likewise, when we identify reproductive identity, it gives us opportunities to notice how social and structural systems can constrain or amplify our choice in parenthood and non-parenthood. So really specifically, what is reproductive identity? Reproductive identity is an emerging concept which captures the dynamic and complex identities that individuals hold along the spectrum of non-parenthood to parenthood. It can be crafted by a host of biological, psychological, and cultural factors. So for instance, fertility, a biological factor, can shape someone's journey to parenthood. Domestic violence can impact one's experience of coming into their maternal identity, their experience of pregnancy. And social norms around child rearing, which Josefina discussed in the context of Kenya, can create unique identities for those that align or misalign with the cultural norms. And importantly, this spectrum of non-parenthood to parenthood is still something to be explored. Next slide, please. Our team also finds it really important to emphasize that there are unique identities that parents and non-parents may have. So for example, the journey to parenthood through the use of in vitro fertilization or IVF may be different than the journey to parenthood through adoption. So while these are both parents, both valid parental identities, the ways in which they come into their parenthood may differentially impact their identity. So similarly, teen mothers, single mothers, immigrant mothers, mothers in prison, all hold profoundly unique and important senses of their maternal role and reaction to the othering of their parenthood. So I have two books on this slide here, just to provide an example. In the book Coming Into Being, teen mothers shared that they're made to feel as if their motherhood is wrong or immoral. However, in the context of the story shared and Promises I Can Keep, the young mothers found that their young motherhood was a powerful source of meaning in their lives, and their children were a necessity. So these are just two examples to show how profoundly personal reproductive identity is, even among parents that have shared experiences. And ultimately, we believe that reproductive identity is something that needs to be authored, something that needs to be openly explored, destigmatized, as all reproductive stories are equal, worthwhile, and powerful paths of self-realization. Next slide, please. So to conclude a description of reproductive identity, I want to emphasize that we cannot discuss identity without acknowledging how the world around us can craft and shape our identity. Reproductive identity is shaped by our environments, religions, cultures, families, and a host of other social factors. Structural barriers can also impact reproductive identity and our ability to be able to self-author our journey and expression of non-parenthood to parenthood. As Josefina shared, the ability to choose if, when, and how to have or not have children is strongly interconnected to social, economic, and geographical indicators. And these can thus become barriers to individuals having free expressions of themselves. This is recognized in the concept of reproductive identity because it allows us to highlight the profound personal impact that these structural barriers have on our self-expression. Reproductive identity is an emerging concept. I hope this brief overview helped everyone to better understand it. And now Bridget is going to spend some time helping us connect this concept into the lives of young girls in Kenya. Thank you.
Hi everyone. So I'll start with a quote by Gautama Buddha. It says, "Every human being is the author of his or her own health or disease." And with my personal story, I became a mom at a early age, fresh from campus, and I didn't have that choice of whether or not to become a parent. Rather, my mom decided for me. And this is something that happens in our day-to-day lives, whereby girls are forced to become parents, even when they're not ready, and they're not given the right to choose how, when, with whom, and even how they want to raise their children. And so I got interested when this concept was introduced to me by the executive director, and I decided to spearhead the workshops to try and get findings on how best we can address this issue of reproductive identity. So how we did it is, number one, we did a 4x1 workshop, 3 of which were done in the urban slum setup. That's in Dandora, Kawangware, and Lunga. And then we had a 1 rural setup workshop. This was to assess how different settings they perceive reproductive identity and what they think. And then we were able to reach 180 girls from the age of 13 to 19. And some of the instructors that were involved was myself, the program manager of Girls Health Ed, and then Beta Kihenjo, our teaching fellow, was also involved in some of these workshops that she spearheaded. Next slide. So the structure of the workshops, how we did it, we had group discussions on the elements of effective storytelling. This is whereby girls could tell us what they understand by the term storytelling and share a bit of stories about themselves or about their surroundings. And then the participants also wrote or do stories of their ideal reproductive identity future. That is before the concept was introduced to them. This was to assess their understanding and whether they have ever had reproductive identity or not. And then some of the questions that were involved was, imagine there's nothing in your way. So do you want to have kids? And if so, when? How many? And close together or far apart? Because this is something that most people don't understand. They just give birth. And then what are the genders? Are they male or female or just one gender? Then would you raise them alone, with a partner, or other family members? Then where do you live? What about if not? And this is a question where most girls didn't want to answer, especially when we asked some of the girls to volunteer to share their stories. So most of them say that they want to become parents, but then there was an aspect of storytelling whereby they wrote their stories or they drew their stories. And we came to find out later that most girls don't want to become parents, but for fear that they'll be judged by their peers, verbally they say that they want to become parents. Then how will you ensure this does not happen? And how will you discuss this with your support network? Especially now we come from a background whereby cultural and religious factors are most involved in deciding whether or not to become a parent as a woman. And the religious factors, cultural factors, and family members, they make that decision for us, but the girl child is not given that option. Then we also asked the participants questions, like, have they ever heard of reproductive identity? And what do they think it is? Then, do you think you have one? And it was a mixed expression. Some say they do, some say they don't, but most were confused because they have never heard the term before. So the presentation of this, the reproductive identity module, it was adapted from the lesson plans of the Cora Lab at Teachers College, Columbia University. And then asking the participants the opening questions again, before and after explaining the concept of reproductive identity. Then after the workshop, participants wrote and drew the story of the reproductive identity. And here we got to experience the changes from, so the first story, there were a set of three stories. So the first story, they didn't have an idea of what it really entailed. But as we continued explaining the concept, their story changed. Next slide. Then we introduced the big identifiers. So this is in terms of now what we taught the girls. So the 8 big identifiers, this is whereby you understand yourself, like who are you, what makes you you, and who influences who you are. So we explained the 8 identifiers. And then we introduced reproductive identity in its multiple dimensions. We also talked about the reproductive life planning. That is the if, when, and how you choose or not choose to become a parent. And then there were questions that were asked to explore more about your reproductive identity. And lastly, we talked about the different paths to parenthood. That is the traditional childbirth. We have adoption, surrogacy, and IVF, where girls were shocked. They didn't know that there were other ways of becoming a parent. And depending with the different girls that we interacted, some wanted to become parents the traditional way, but others, especially the girls who interacted with at Dandora, because they came from a children's home, a safe house, they were more interested in adoption because they felt that maybe their parents abandoned them when they were young, and they wanted to give home and love to other children who have experienced the same. And then surrogacy and IVF, it's something that was new to them. Some will be interested, but now the factor of financial support and availability arose. Thank you. Next.
Thank you, Bridget. So before I start, I also wanted to say that I didn't know what reproductive identity was until we started this program. And from what I've gathered from these findings, generally, is that I have a choice of becoming a parent or not. The time I want to be a parent, I do this on my own terms. And I'm happy that we did these programs because these girls get to have the same choices and make the same decision that best fit them without any influence from other people. So from our findings, the older girls aged between 17 to 19 years had a better understanding of reproductive identity and parenthood than the ones that are a bit younger, that is 13 to 16 years. From this, we can see that Erikson development stages are in play because here we see the 5th stage, which is identity versus confusion. We see that girls here, they get to know who they are, what they want, what are their future goals, like everything that they are making, any decision they are making is going to have an impact in their future. So when I say that the older girls had a better understanding than the older girls, it means that this is possibly because that older girls had a clear, those girls aged 17 to 19 had a clear, like are more mature in terms of cognitive and emotional, and they show that they are more exposed to discussions of parenthood, relationships, family planning. So they are more well known to these concepts compared to younger girls. That is why the older girls had a better understanding of reproductive identity. So, and the other point, more girls wanted to become parents than not. This number was high because even after we introduced the whole concepts about reproductive identity, we found out that girls that did not want to become parents, when they found out that there are other alternative ways of being parents, like Bridget mentioned, the surrogacy, adoptions, more of them became more open to becoming parents based on those alternatives rather than the traditional way of becoming parents. Okay, and then the preferred age was between 23 and 30. So here I'll be discussing the factors that Regan has discussed before on the factors that influence the decisions these girls make. The first one was age. So in most research, the research that is done, it says that girls, the age that the fertility rate is high for girls is between their late teens and before 30. So a lot of girls preferred to have children between the age of 23 and 30. And when we ask them why that age, most of them say because the society, I'm quoting, and people around them say, after the age of 30, your fertility rate is low and you'll have a Down syndrome child. Like, they have a lot of stereotypes and misconceptions about it. And even the research that I found says that by the age of 30, your fertility rate starts to decline. And by the time you're reaching mid-35, it is a bit faster. And by the time you're reaching 45, it's like you won't, like, it's actually naturally impossible for you to have a child by the time you're reaching 45 to 55 years. But then again, Sankara has also said that it's possible for you to get a child even beyond some ages. So, but that is just a factor girls mostly came up with, said that age is a reason why they want to have children between that timeline. The second factor is their socialization. Their way of socialization is a factor that influenced their decisions. So primarily, most of them were influenced by their mothers and older sisters to be specific, while other factors like social media or celebrities had influence on their decision. Most girls said they were influenced by their mothers and younger sisters. So this means that this socialization that these adolescents have, girls, the people they have around them or the things they see they shape the way their attitudes are towards reproductive identity and their reproductive life. Okay, the next point, girls reported being religion as a factor and culture. So religion and culture has a significant influence on the girls' attitudes towards reproductive identity. This was seen with the way Muslim girls, I'm just saying from what we saw, they were more enclosed to discussing these things with us because they felt that they are under pressure to becoming parents earlier compared to Christian girls who are more inclined to being flexible to having children at later ages compared to the Muslim girls. So this means that the cultural norms and religious teachings have an impact on how girls perceive reproductive identity or their decisions when it comes to parenthood. The next slide. Okay, before I forget, economically, another factor was their financial or economic stability was another factor that influenced their decision. As Bridget has said, these girls preferred to be economically or financially stable when it came to being parents. But then again, as I have said before, age was also a factor. We found that girls aged between 17 and 19, when they were sharing their stories, they were more like persuasive. They always repeated the word like, I want to be financially stable. I want to be financially stable before I become a parent, compared to girls who are younger, 13 to 14, who like they just wanted to be parents without thinking of other factors like financial, there are responsibilities that come with having children. And this shows that older girls had a better understanding when it comes to financial responsibilities of raising children compared to the younger girls. Okay. And then the key findings across locations. Well, in slummy pre and post workshops in Lungalunga, Dandora, and Kawangware, many girls wanted to be parents compared to many girls wanted to be parents compared to their decision was just the same prior to their stories, before knowing what reproductive identity is, and after what reproductive identity is. Their decision was just the same. But when it came to rural areas in Thika, their decision kind of shifted from wanting to be parents to like it's a choice. Like they found out it's like a choice. So I can become a parent or not, despite what my culture or religion says. So I felt like the girls in Thika way of thinking and attitudes shifted just abruptly because of the knowledge they got from us about reproductive identity. So even across location, each workshop the girls had their curiosity was shifted from the concepts that we were discussing. The Kawangware girls were more curious about surrogacy. The Thika girls were more inclined to acceptance, like will they accept us just because now I have shifted my way of thinking or my choice? Are they going to accept me? Are they going to accept my choice or not? They were also inclined to things like surrogacy, alternative ways of becoming parents. And in Dandora, as Bridget has said, the girls were from children's homes, so they were more inclined to knowing how adoption works in Kenya, which they were explained to very well. Yeah, and 95% of the girls preferred to tell their reproductive future stories by writing, that is through storytelling, which our next Pavita will give some of the examples the girls gave from their stories rather than drawing, although there were other girls who preferred drawing, but the percentage of girls who preferred writing their reproductive identity in form of a story was higher compared to the drawings. Next. Okay, reasons for not wanting to become parents. First of all, difficulty finding a stable partner because of high personal standards and perception that boys have become irresponsible. Okay. Sorry. I feel like that is kind of true. Well, based in Kenya anyway. I don't know about the other countries. Men are becoming irresponsible. There are many deadbeat fathers and many single mothers. And then there is this research that was done that shows that the percentage of single mothers in Kenya is around 60%. Either they may become single parents because either they have the teen pregnancies or divorces or windows, but the percentage is quite high for 60%. And teen girls are the one with more than half of these single parents are teenagers who are become pregnant at early ages. And this means that their thinking is kind of right, because if these percentages shows that the percentage of single mothers is high, then it means that probably there is some irresponsible men stroke boys. Just my opinion. And then the cost, this means that many girls are already struggling to support themselves, and kids, and they think kids become an extra burden. So when it comes to this point, the girls used to say that based on what they have seen through social media or through their surroundings or society or communities, raising a child is like a burden. I'm quoting, it's like a burden. And this means that if you get a child, you will keep struggling all your life. You'll have to think about what will this child eat? What will this child, where medication in terms of hospitals, in terms of education, like it's just a burden for them. So they'd prefer not to have children. Being raised in poverty and having struggled growing up and not wanting the same for their children. Well, this was mainly seen in Dandora, where most girls were from children's home. They know the struggles, and most of them, they are from low income areas. So most of them prefer not to have, some of them prefer not to have children because of the struggle they had growing up, and they do not want to inflict the same kind of struggles emotionally, physically, financially on their children. Not wanting to undergo physical changes during pregnancy. Yeah, this means that the changes that comes with pregnancy, like body weight, big nose, things like that, most girls did not want that. Then upbringing of being threatened to stay away from men in order to not to pregnant contribution to phobia of these children. Honestly speaking, especially girls from rural areas, Kenya, the upbringing is you're not supposed to be around men. So you find that some of these children, even if they are taken to boarding schools or day schools, they have that fear of being around men. I don't know, it's being shy plus being taught that men, when you are near a man or you're in close relationship with a man, you'll probably get pregnant, things like that. So most of them, like, they had that phobia of being around men, and the way their parents used to threaten them about being close to men made them, it contributed to them not wanting to be parents. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, both Bridget and Berta. Bridget, I see you have your hand raised. Did you want to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to add something on what Beta has just said. On the economic factor, the girls weren't really talking about the well-being, the financial stability of the guy or the person whom they want to raise the children with, but rather themselves, because they felt that in the world today, especially in Kenya, you find that the women has taken up all the responsibility. As we said, that the guys have become irresponsible, so they just impregnate you and they run away like never before. So yeah, they chose that if they were to become a parent, they need to have stable careers, they need to have their financial well-being before they decide to become parents. And then if there's other options of becoming parents like adoption and surrogacy, and they have those funds to become a parent in that way and not by birth.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. So before I move on to the next slide, I just, especially now after having heard both Bridget and Berta officially talk about this, I just want to give you both a special shout out. You took this concept and you really hit the ground running with it in Kenya. So major shout out to both of you. I am so proud of what you have done for the girls and young women we're working with in Kenya. So at my heart and soul, I am a storyteller, and few things get me going more than the rawness and authenticity of people's stories. Bridget and Berta sent me 9 hours worth of video content, and I spent the good part of the past couple of weeks going through most of it. And so with that, I wanted to close by sharing some quotes and stories that the girls and young women shared as part of the workshops. So pre-workshop, some stories and quotes that came from the girls. I want to be a mom just like my mom. I want to have more children than my family does. I want to have 5 children and raise them in a nuclear family. I would like to have 2 kids, far apart at the age of 27. I want to live in the US, have girls, and raise them with a partner. I want to raise my kids in India. I want 2 girls at the age of 25. I would like 2 boys, 2 girls at the age of 28. I want to live in a rural town, have a good job, and raise my kids with a partner. I want kids of different genders, and I want to raise them with a husband. I would love to stay at my parents' place. I want 2 kids when I get married and want to raise them with their father. When I am financially stable, I want 2 boys and 2 girls. I want to raise them with their father and be close to relatives. According to God, it is a blessing, so I would love to make it happen. I want 3 kids, 2 girls and 1 boy. I want to have them in 2025. I want a husband. Every day I pray for them. Every day in the morning, I'm praying to God to give me, and the rest was inaudible. So even just looking within the pre-workshop stories, in general, we're seeing a trend toward these young ladies wanting to have kids, but look at the breadth of futures that they're idealizing for themselves. And I think this is a really incredible thing. So post-workshop, I do not want kids. I cannot mix child rearing and a career. I am influenced by my mom. I want to make my parents proud. I want to study and have a career. Resources for having kids are money, a house, a good job, a car, and a handsome husband. I want to have 4 kids. I want to have a family nearby. I want to ensure a better life for my kids no matter the situation. I want to go to the PhD level and balance a career with raising kids to ensure that I fulfill their desires and mine because I value my accomplishments. My mother is my mentor. If I get pregnant, I will accept it. If I get a job, I will leave my kids at daycare. I want to be a good woman. I want to be the best mom. I want to give my children a good life. I want to be a parent. I want to have a husband. And these are our sources for all of the research that we did. So just going back to some of these story slides, you can see how there's a very major shift from pre-workshop where they're very much just focusing on, building their family, to post-workshop where we're really getting a much more holistic picture of these girls and young women. So they're seeing parenthood, the dream of parenthood, the desire for parenthood or lack thereof as one part of themselves, but not the be all and end all. And they're recognizing that life is far too complex to limit one's identity to parenthood versus non-parenthood. And that is where reproductive identity fits in. It's one piece of the whole puzzle. And so as you can see from everything that we've shared today, reproductive identity is on the frontiers right now. All of us, I believe I can speak for all of us on the team when we say that we couldn't be more excited to be at the forefront of an emerging and incredibly important concept that has significant implications for the lives, not only of girls and young women everywhere, but of people everywhere. And this is a topic that ought to be included in comprehensive sexuality education, just in the same way that we're preparing our girls and young women to live their dreams, whether that be professionally or educationally. Why not get them to think about what they see for themselves in their personal lives and in their family lives? And so with that, I would love to open the Q&A. Audience members, the Q&A is open and all of us are ready to answer your questions. Okay, so I see that we have a question in the chat. What about MSM? We need help. What about men having sex with men? We need help. Would anybody like to respond to that? Panelists, any thoughts about men having sex with men? Yes, Bridget. Bridget, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. So the question is not really clear whether he's asking in relation to reproductive identity or not, but that's a personal choice. Like having sex with men, that's a personal choice. And if you want to become a parent in Kenya, it's not approved. As of the moment, yes, it's legal, it's not approved, but we hope that in time it will be something legal. But for you to become a parent in Kenya, you need to be two parents. You're registered for a legal, you have a marriage certificate or an affidavit, and it's between a man and a woman, not bisexuals or any other form of.
Oh, Bridget, did you have, okay. Yeah. Yeah, so Bridget, thank you for illuminating that about the Kenyan cultural context. I know my American colleagues and I can probably say more about the context in the US, but I think if I'm understanding correctly, it seems like the question is really focused on Kenya. But that being said, I mean, this is yet another reason that we need to be talking about reproductive identity in comprehensive sexuality education from an early age, because Girls Health Ed has now 10 years worth of data to show that introducing comprehensive sexuality education at an early age. And by when I say comprehensive sexuality education, I truly mean comprehensive, as in we're not just talking about sexual activity or sexual and reproductive health and rights. We're encompassing the whole range of activities in terms of what it means to be a human being. So self-love, mental health, bullying, interpersonal relationships, how we see ourselves as living, thriving beings. Taking care of ourselves physically, taking care of ourselves mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. We really do have the power to change social norms. And it's not going to be easy by any means, as we can see with everything that's going on in the US. It's not going to be an overnight process, but we absolutely must be perpetuating these conversations in our day-to-day lives. From an anonymous attendee about single mothers. Girls here seem to be comfortable being single parents. Do you think it has an impact on their children's lives, especially emotionally? And do you think this is a problem? Panelists. Yes, Sankara.
Yes. So these are my thoughts. As a single mom, I really do not think that there is necessarily anything wrong with being a single mom. I think what happens is that society has a lot of stereotypes, and there's a lot of connotations and there are a lot of interpretations, about what it means to be a single mom. The truth is that being a single mom is pretty much being a single parent, and there's really not been any, say, conclusive studies that have said that if you come from a single household that, maybe a child doesn't fully develop, or a child is not able to really attain or achieve the highest level of, say, education or even success, or, whatever it is that society wants to, put all these buckets into of success. So I think, no, I would say it is not a problem. If a girl or a woman specifically decides that they want to become a single parent and they find specific ways, be it through sperm banks, or even be it through, having sperm donors, I don't think there is an issue with that, because ultimately society and community exist for purposes of support. So what I would say is that we support all these young women or girls who are raising children on their own. Raising children on your own is another battle. You're always on the front line. So you can only imagine what being on the front line of any battle is like. So I would say that as society, one of our, a healthy society is a society that supports not only girls, not only women, not only men, but everybody. So I think that's the goal we should have, and that's what we should aim to attain. So no, it doesn't have an impact on the children's lives. It not necessarily, it depends on how society supports the mother. If we do not support the mom, then definitely it's going to have a negative impact. So again, it's the balance. That's what I'd say.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Sankara. Thank you so much for that. We have time for one last question here, and I see Yasmin has asked, how can teachings of reproductive identity neutralize the motherhood mandate, where women's identity is characterized as a mandate that is built into our social institutions as well as our psyches? How can girls and women tease apart their own genuine desires for parenthood or non-parenthood versus societal expectations? Panelists. Any of-
can,
Yeah, please, Regan.
oh, yeah, so I obviously can't speak to the culture within Kenya, so I'll just speak really broadly and say integrating concepts of reproductive identity into comprehensive sexuality education spaces or like safe spaces where people in community can have conversation about parenthood and social expectations. Being able to give people a community where they can discuss these concepts is a great way for people to safely discuss what their own desires are. And also the exercises that we did with the girls where they had the opportunity to journal and draw and self-reflect can be a great way for people to self-discover and then again bring those into conversation with other people.
Excellent. Thank you, Regan. So we are at time now. I know that there's some other questions in the chat, but please feel free to reach out to us offline. As a reminder, you can get in touch with us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter/X. We're at Girls Health Ed and at Girls Health Ed KE. Thank you all so much for attending today. This will be the first conversation about reproductive identity of many, and let's keep the conversation going. Thank you, attendees. Thank you, esteemed panelists, and have a great day/night.